In one of Russia's largest protests in 2019, over 1,000 people were arrested, 59% of those people being 35 years old or younger. Despite the threat of arrests, Russia's youth has become increasingly politically visible and involved in relevant social issues. Russia's Gen Z isn't afraid of making its voices heard, but this also comes with a set of challenges. So today we invited Liza Mikhaleva, a young Russian activist, to talk about the feats and personal experiences she faces as an activist in Russia.
Add it up.
Hi, my name is Liza Mikhaleva, and I am a journalist, a DJ, and an activist. And my interests mainly include activism. So I do activism in feminism, LGBTQ plus rights, anti-racism, and also connected with sex education a bit, bits and pieces.
So as an advocate, could you tell us about some of your most meaningful projects?
I think one of them was when I got into activism, because I used to do fashion styling, and that's why I wanted to do fashion journalism. And at one point I got connected with this activist fashion clothing brand called Kultrap, and I was asked to style a shoot for them, and the shoot was like a protest. So it was like a performance slash protest slash statement, and it was really great because it was during the summer 2019, during the summer of protests in Moscow, where people were like actually going on the streets and like showing their unhappiness with the falsification of everything, literally. And so that was one of the very meaningful events for me in my advocacy, because that's where it started. Because I came in there as a fashion stylist, and then I was like, well, obviously I came there because I was following them and I was interested in what they did, but I wasn't actually like actively participating in being an activist myself. And after this shoot, I just learned so much, and I was like, okay, like I can't be apolitical anymore, because in Russia you just grow up and like you're taught to kind of like shut up and like be quiet and like just make sure that you're safe, don't say anything wrong, don't say anything like which can get you in trouble. And I think that's obviously a lot to do with the history of like the Soviet Union and how our parents are just like scared to death because they know that like people could literally face death for like speaking out against the power and like the government. And it's very powerful because it just came out with this very like rebellious soul, because all the models were also like quite young, and it was about the idea of like how unhappy the young people are feeling, how ready we are to like speak out, to raise our voice, to go in the streets, to show that we care.
Before, like when you were apolitical, were you apolitical because you were afraid to speak out, or were you apolitical because you weren't as interested in being politically aware?
I think it was definitely kind of growing up in the bubble, definitely growing up in a very privileged bubble of like me having a lot of opportunities, going to international school, like traveling the world. Because obviously if you're poor, if you're like working class, if you're struggling, it's much more closer to you to be like to rely on the government, to understand how can the government help you. And when the government is literally like you, it's hard. But obviously being privileged and like not really having to deal with it, it wasn't something I actually questioned. And I think it's also, I just kind of went along with the whole rhetoric of whatever the grown-ups were saying around, like kind of, oh, you know, like Putin is not great, he's just the best we can have, like who is the alternative? Like, oh, he did so much for the country. Like, so I think because before you actually get your own voice, you know, like, because obviously you're a teenager and then you start like reading, you start thinking, like forming your own opinion. So when I started doing this, I was like, oh wait, like I don't actually have to be saying what my parents are thinking. I don't actually have to be saying what the TV is telling me. Like I can actually form my own opinion. And I was like, okay, I disagree. I think this is all a manipulation. Obviously there is like an alternative to all of this. And so I think it was kind of me being not interested, and at the same time being afraid to speak out, just because you grow up with it, you see it, like even like Pussy Riot, and it says everyone can be Pussy Riot, everyone can be. You see on the TV that, oh, these like girls went into the church and like danced there and like screamed, okay, bad stuff about Putin, and now they're like in prison. So of course you're like scared to speak out. And I think, again, with the Russian parents and like everyone is always just like, don't do anything wrong. So I think it was definitely a mix, yeah.
And we saw that your Instagram has over 8,000 followers and you focus on advocating for relevant social issues. What's the most meaningful issue to you and why?
So I think the most meaningful issue for me is feminism. When I went to a picket, which is like a singular protest in Russia, which is supposedly allowed by the law, without like notifying the city council or whatever organizing anything, where you just like stand alone with a poster and like demand stuff. When I went to one of those, advocating for against violence towards LGBTQ plus activists, because an LGBTQ plus activist, Yelena Grigorieva, was murdered in St. Petersburg. So when I went to that, and that was next to the president's administration on Kitai Gorod, that was my first one ever. And the backlash was that the policeman came up to me while I was with my like poster, and he asked for my documents. He took a picture of my passport. He took a picture of me, and after that I felt very anxious and very wrong, because I was like, did he have a right to do this? And then I googled, and turns out he didn't. So obviously, because it was like my first PK, I did read like the precautions, like how to make sure that you don't get arrested, because there's like different rules. Like, for example, if you stand next to someone within less than like 50 meters, that can be seen as an organized protest, because there's like two people. So you have to like make sure you don't have your poster out when there's like someone else picketing, I'm not sure what protesting. So I read all of this, but I didn't read an important thing, which is called Закон о полиции, which is the law about police, where it explains what kind of reasons and what kind of like authority does a policeman have. Like, why can they ask for your documents? Why can they ask for taking a picture of you and like stuff like this? Basically, he didn't have a right for this. And basically, I felt very, very anxious for a few days. I was like talking to people on like social media, asking about it, asking some like lawyers about this, because I was very scared that they're gonna put me like into a certain like base, like, I don't know, online base. And after I got into activism a bit more, I was like, well, because they literally, they have my data, they know where I live, they know what I look like, they know that like I'm obviously a supporter of LGBTQ plus community. And first I was like quite anxious, but then I was like, honestly, with everything that I do on the internet, like with my connection to all the other activists, like they know who I am anyway. Like those who need to know, they know who I am. Like my passport is just like in some list of activists, which is, it's just uncomfortable, but like as a part of activism in Russia, I guess you have to be okay with it. Yeah.
So what is the biggest challenge you faced growing up in Russia?
I think being myself, as in like looking the way I look, being able to express myself and not being scared to like be beaten up or raped because of that. Definitely a lot to do with being a woman. So like it is very, very scary to be, but I mean, it's a universal issue. It's scary to be a woman like walking alone at night somewhere, but it's also, within the Russian context, being a woman walking somewhere like alone at night and knowing that like if you do get in trouble or like if you do get raped, the police is not going to help you, or like it might rape you. Also looking the way I look, like, because I get called like a freak, like stared at on the streets. Again, I don't really care, but physically it is sometimes scary, because I'm also living in the outskirts of Moscow, so like I don't live central. So it's always like, oh, like, am I gonna get in trouble for this? Like, is someone gonna try and like, I don't know, beat me up because of this? A hard realization which I'm coming to right now is how difficult it's actually to change anything. So when you become an activist, you actually, at first you're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then you're like, oh, like there are people who've been doing this thing for years and they might have achieved like small things, which is great and important. But on a large scale, that's like where the existential kind of very sad part comes in, when I'm like, am I actually changing anything? Like, how is this actually gonna help the society, the Russian society? Is it actually, like, am I doing it for something? Like, obviously, like, I know that I am doing it for something, but it's definitely gets sad and you're like, oh, so that's why so many like politicians or like intellectuals or activists immigrate. And you're like, oh, so maybe it's just my youthful like spirit of I'm gonna change the world. It just kind of gets pressured sometimes. But for now, I'm still full of it.
So we were talking about change. If you could change anything in Russia, what would it be?
If I could change anything in Russia, it would be the government. And then hopefully with the new government, it would be just the way things are approached and the conservativeness of the society. So like how conservative the society is, and like understanding that basically women's issues are important, LGBTQ plus issues are important, sex education is important, and all of that jazz, like becoming less conservative. I think what's crucial to this change is the people's, like changing the people's mentality of terpila. So someone who just takes what's given to them and just like suffers the given like pain and like what's it called, like misery. So you know, because like Russians like throughout the history were always like referred to as a terpile, so we just take it, like all the pain, everything that happens, we just like take it, work with it, live with it. So if this part was to be changed, I think it would also like spark up the people's understanding that they need a change in the government.
If you could say anything to the Russian youth, what would it be?
Try to form your own opinion. Like, try to actually read and think about what do you think about some issues. Like, where do you actually stand? Like, do you just say yes and agree with something because it's your friends who say it and your parents, or is that what you actually believe and think about?
Add it up.